That should just be a strap line for the conference.
Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've got an almost full house here with 2 seats left at the front, so maybe they'll tell us, 2 more people will show up and we'll be able to say it is a full house. But thank you all for joining us. I am Chris Curtis. I am the Labour MP for Milton Keynes North, the first MP for Milton Keynes that was born there and grew up there. And I'm also, you've got 2 seats here at the front. You're going to have to... and I also in Parliament lead the Labour Growth Group, one of the the largest group of Labour backbenchers in this Parliament, determined to do whatever we can to get the British economy growing again, to get Britain building again after nearly 2 decades of pretty anemic economic growth. We're here today to talk about the fantastic economic investment opportunities in my hometown of Milton Keynes, which we believe, well, actually, we don't have to believe, the evidence shows is one of the most interesting, innovative and fastest growing economies in the UK. We've now got an economy that's about the same size as Oxford and Cambridge combined. We've got productivity numbers 128% of the UK national average, good jobs. For any housing developers in the room, and maybe you'll cover this in a minute, it is one of the few places in the country where you don't struggle to sell a house and where you actually have fewer viability issues than you have in many other parts of the country. And it's also been one of the places where we not just one of the fastest growing places in the country. I think the Centre for Cities report said we are the place that's building second highest number of homes in the country at the moment. But we have been doing that consistently for decades, and we're here today because we want to talk about how we're going to continue to do that and actually want to accelerate that in the years to come. So we're going to have a brief discussion about the opportunities that we're looking to put forward, how we're planning to accelerate that, the opportunities that are coming forward. But given the opportunities that are coming up with the Oxcam Arc, the government's determination to accelerate that, the East-West Railway line that'll be opening with trains running from later on this year. But also, I think, and I say this as a new MP, what we now have in Milton Keynes is real political alignment between the 3 Labour MPs across Milton Keynes, the local Labour Council, and actually the public. The polling has consistently shown that people in Milton Keynes are far more supportive of extra development and extra investment than you get in many other parts of the country because it is built into our DNA and because we have been doing it for so long. So we're determined to continually move the barriers out of the way to that investment, to work with people to get that investment in. And I'm going to start off, if it's all right, handing over to Pete Marland, who's the leader of Milton Keynes Council, to talk about his vision for the city and where he sees the exciting opportunities for growth and investment in the future.
Thanks, Chris. For those that don't know me, and I know most people, I think, in the room have at some point come into my office and been told exactly what I want you to deliver. Hello, everyone. Look, it is the country's worst kept secret at the moment, isn't it, that Milton Keynes stands at the point of being able to deliver a huge amount for not just our region, but nationally. If the government are really serious about delivering 1.5 million homes by the end of this Parliament, not at some future point in the planning cycle, but by the end of this Parliament, and continue to do so, I think it's really easy to sort of get sucked into it's 1.5 million by the end of this Parliament, and then what? Well, it should be 300,000 houses plus forever, setting that new standard. Then Milton Keynes has got to be the place where you are placing a lot of the short to medium term delivery before that longer term delivery aspect of allowing the new changes to the planning system, allowing changes to the building system to actually kick in and deliver elsewhere in the country. And as I sort of said to Matt Pennicook quite recently. One, you can't live in a planning permission. Not a single person in this country lives in a planning permission. People live in homes. So as soon as planning permissions are granted, it's about making sure that schemes are viable and deliverable and delivered quickly. And it's great that we've got our colleagues from Berkeley in the room who are able to show that Milton Keynes are able to deliver that. But it is also about making sure that we build those communities around it. And I am very blue Labour on this. I'm an ultimate pragmatist, that I don't sit in a room and sort of think that community consultation is all about going to some drafty village hall and trying to convince 5 people who turn up that this development is not what you want not what they want in their backyard. And as a sort of as a hand up planner in the family sort of thing who has to go and do this sort of thing, you're never going to convince those people. Never going to convince those people that the 50 houses that are being built on a field that hasn't been used for the past 25 years sort of will deliver a better outcome for the local school or this or that. But I think in terms of just political will, on one side you've got that group of community that I think you will take with you. In Milton Keynes, 60% of people are broadly positive towards development, and a greater number of maybe if you deliver the schools and the hospitals and the things that we do in Milton Keynes. But on the other side, you've got that sort of like, just get on with it. Just get on with it, because if you don't get on with it, we get stuck in sort of consultation purgatory. And I said earlier, my little girls are 3. We moved to our house in Milton Keynes, which is a new build. They've got, my little boy and my girls have got no concept of what was there before. No concept, because it was done quickly. And generally, in planning terms, if things are done quickly and things are done in the right way, people forget there was ever a controversy in the first place about building it. But we do need, as Milton Keynes, those levers to be able to grow faster and grow quicker, because it isn't just about building homes, it's about building the city and building the depth of the city, building the infrastructure of the city, and infrastructure in its broadest sense. So we do the roads brilliantly. You know, it annoys me that the RTPI National Planning Awards, when Paul and I go, Paul, our Director of Planning and Placemaking, you know, national awards are, you know, major schemes are above 50. 50 wouldn't even get to our planning committee. It would just be sort of pushed through very quickly on delegated schemes, where you get sort of Homes England going, look at this amazing thing that we did. We gave this development 20 million quid to build a school. That comes naturally in Milton Keynes because we have the tariff, we're able to do it. But it's actually about the value added. What do the people in Milton Keynes get? But also, what does the country get out of delivering so many houses in Milton Keynes? Because next door to us, we've got Universal going ahead, 8,000 jobs, 8 million visitors a year. Just down the road from us, Luton Airport is expanding. London Luton Airport, I think we forget quite how small we are as a country, and that everybody laughs, oh, it's not London Luton, is it? It's like, yeah, but actually, when we go to China or India or places like this, Milton Keynes is actually a suburb of London, and we shouldn't really be scared of saying that in international markets. But we also need to pitch. And our pitch, and you'll see it in your brochure, is one. I think we need strong devolution for our area. I think we do need that directly elected mayor to be able to deliver on the more strategic aspects of growth. Things like making sure the Environment Agency, making sure that Western Power Networks, making sure that all of those sort of agencies pull in the right direction and pull quickly, because I think Adrian sitting at the back, the biggest delay on MK East was actually getting the power grid in there. It wasn't the planning. It wasn't the school. It wasn't the health centre. It was the power to power them all. And it's a completely electric site, no gas, all air source heat pumps, all of that sustainability stuff. We need a university. And that isn't just for local placemaking, because actually if you come to Milton Keynes after 6 o'clock, city centre is pretty dead. We should be honest about that. But that university needs to be actually a university for the whole of the UK. We do not have an MIT in this country. We do not have anything like Caltech in this country. If you look at Oxford and Cambridge, or the ability to be able to spin out companies like they do out of MIT, like they do out of Harvard, That just isn't possible in this country. It isn't really possible in Oxford and Cambridge. There will be companies, but if we want to spin out real new economy, next generation companies that are based on the knowledge economy and AI, we need to have the space to do that, and at scale. So it's great that we've got so many SMEs in this country. It's great that we've got the talent, but really a lot of engineering and high-end jobs, we still in this country regard them as madmen in sheds that sort of need to go out, and generally that's why we lose these companies. Dyson, although we've got no doubt got our political views about James Dyson. James Dyson is actually quite an archetype in this country. Madman in a shed, couldn't get funding from a big company, tried to spin it out on his own, and in time, all those jobs were actually generally based somewhere else. We need to capture that in this country, and a university to capture and be able to spin out those companies. And the last thing we actually need, in my view, is to be redesignated a new town. We proved it with Milton Keynes 1.0. That we are able to do it. We've done it faster than everywhere else. We've done it more successfully than everywhere else. For every pound that was invested in Milton Keynes, we've returned 14 to the Treasury over the lifetime of the 60 years that we've been available. If the government is serious about inclusive growth, and the government is serious about growth, maybe being able to invest in public services, then actually we need Milton Keynes to grow so we can fund the regeneration that is so badly needed in places like Burnley and Accrington and Consett and Ashfield and all of those places that have been left behind over the past 20 years. And so making sure that we are designated to be able to capture more, not all, but more of that land value, because I genuinely don't think it's developers. Maybe I'm sort of often on the wrong side of this discussion, because a lot of my councillors think it's nasty developers, but actually it's not generally developers, it's generally the landowners who are able to sell at a really inflated price, and then developers just have to build off the back of that. If we're able to make sure that particularly low-grade farmland that Milton Keynes is built on is able to be bought and sold at a fair price, then actually developers will get a better deal out of it, and so will the local council, because we're just taking more profit out of the system, because most of that profit ends up going to people who have probably either owned land for absolute generations, who will make a profit on that anyway, and that's fair, but not at agricultural value, or has actually been bought at speculation value, sort of maybe a decade, 15 years ago, and they're still able to accumulate because they bought it so long ago. It's gone in the book, they've bought it at book value, and now sort of they're able to sell it on maybe 15, 20 years later at a huge inflated price. So being able to capture more of that, I think, is absolutely intrinsic to do some of the bigger infrastructure things that we need, like a mass transport network, like the university, like a lot of the other things that we need. So hopefully that's the vision for Milton Keynes. The vision is not about numbers. I would deliver you 200,000 houses if the funding and land and the availability to do so, is there in the right way and at speed. It's actually about developing in the right way, at speed, at scale. And our pitch to government is we can do that faster and cheaper than looking at a map to where a train line is and where a road intersects a train line and going, that's a good place for a new town, because that's 15 years away, right from the very start. And we can also do it at better quality and at far greater pace than a lot of other places as well, at quantum. So that's our sell to government, and our sell to you guys is, if you want to do it in the right way, and most of you, I can see most of you, if you want to do it in the right way, brilliant. And if you want to do it in the right way, but perhaps haven't been able to sort of bridge some of those viability funding gaps, then bat for us, particularly on the mayoral side. We need access to that brownfield money that Leeds get. We need access to the brownfield money that sort of Manchester get. We need that bridging money to get some schemes away, particularly in the city centre. So if you bat for us, we'll bat for you as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I'll just note on that as well, there's a brilliant report out this week from WPI looking at where would be good places for the new towns to be placed, which the New Towns Task Force is currently looking at. And not only did they list Milton Keynes as the top location to start a new town, they actually said that we could be a trailblazer location because of our ability to get going quickly. And that is both in terms of the urban expansions on the side of the city, pretty much all out in all directions at this stage, to the north, to the east, and to the south. And development still happening to the west, but also in terms of what can be done in the centre of the city. So for anyone who's been to the centre of Milton Keynes, one of the least dense city centres in the country, lots of street level parking, lots of old office space that isn't now utilised. But 30-minute train journey to London, and in the middle of a growing city, the capacity to turn that into one of the densest city centres in the country with thousands of new flats, particularly BTR, is an incredibly exciting opportunity that we can get going with very quickly, and we can start to have some of those, especially if we've got a new combined authority to go alongside it, we can start to have some of those first new town homes built in a very short period of time. I'm going to hand over to Elva from Berkeley's just to talk about the you're building MK East in my constituency. This is 5,000 new homes. The Prime Minister and I visited recently to lay the foundation of the first of those 5,000 new homes. Do you want to talk to us about that project and what it's been like to, why you decided to build in Milton Keynes, what the project's been like, and how it's been working in the local area?
Hello, my name is Elva Phelan. I am the Group Head of Planning for Berkeley Group. We predominantly build in the southeast and as far up as Birmingham, a lot of development in London, but a proud big site in Milton Keynes. In terms of why we decided to build in Milton Keynes, one, it's a very clear place with a clear vision and an aligned political direction. People want building here. These two people right beside me have a very clear vision, and ultimately as well, there's a lot of pride in Milton Keynes. There's a clear sense of identity. It's a place that exists. There's so much pride, and from a sales perspective, you're building into a market that wants to live there, and that helps in terms of from a commercial perspective. So from a evil developer perspective, it's good, but also just the political alignment. And the site was allocated in 2019. We got permission in 2020 or 2022, sorry. And we have laid the first foundation, and I think the first phase is 150 homes, and are likely to move in next summer. So, what we need to deliver in this parliament, and if the government's objective is going to happen, is happening at Milton Keynes. And I think the rest of the country could take a lead from this. I have a sympathy with the government in terms of the new towns policy. It's good to see some longer term planning going on and not just focusing on this parliament. So whilst it is going to be ambitious to do the 1.5 million homes on the new towns, I think everyone knows that's going to be a much longer period, but not for Milton Keynes. So there's a political win to have there in terms of Milton Keynes is already underway, and there's a lot of growth to be built upon, and that's just really, really positive. But also with the homes, we also have 4 million square feet of commercial space as well, which is about 5,000 jobs. So it's not just about homes, but also about employment, and that's to kind of support the rest of Milton Keynes' economic growth, not competing with the town centre. It's a different type of offer, and it's about boosting economic growth and helping to deliver MK2's vision in the longer term. Covering it? Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. So thank you both for introducing that. As Pete mentioned, there is a brilliant booklet here that covers some of the key points about why we think we are such a great investment opportunity and what that vision is. I'm going to start by handing over to some Q&A. So if anybody wants to ask any questions at all or have any thoughts that they want to add, please do pop your hands up. Go on, we'll start with Adam here. Oh, and go on, and introduce who you are.
I don't know. My name is Jack. I'm the managing director of the Uni Initiative. Milton Keynes hasn't got a university at the moment. Do you think is there any ongoing discussions about either moving a university to Milton Keynes or starting one in the next few years?
Okay. Anyone else got any questions before I hand over to Pete to answer that one? All right, you're going to have to think of some questions then. Go on, Eleanor.
answer the second question first. The proposition is what we call BLMK, so it would be Bedfordshire, the two Bedfordshires, Bedford, Central Bedfordshire, Luton and Milton Keynes, slightly on the potentially smaller side at present in terms of its population. But if you project that over the likelihood over the next 25 to 30 years, we actually start to get up to, I mean, even just Milton Keynes, you know, if we build on the scale that we're proposing, let alone the scale that we could, we get up to 500,000 people by 2050. So, you know, just on the scale of quantum, but that takes in Universal, it probably take in Thamesford as well, and would take in Luton Airport and everything else that goes on around that. And just from a service level perspective, it to me isn't just about planning, it is about the ability to deliver better health services. So we are coterminous with our ICB, for instance, and actually we would be able to deliver better joined up services that would cost each individual council money. So it's not just on the Milton Keynes footprint, it's on a regional footprint, the ability to be able to bring in police and fire and do all of that sort of thing as well. On the question about the university, when hasn't Milton Keynes been trying to bring in a partner? I think when I first became a councillor, they were working with, I'm gonna look at some of our Milton Keynes colleagues in the room who probably have slightly better longevity memory than me. De Montfort, I think, have been and gone. I think University of Bedfordshire have been and gone at one point. We're having a conversation with Cranfield about MKU, and then we're having a conversation with the OU. But most of it just hinges on universities tend to be asset rich but revenue and capital poor, and the weird intrinsic bonkers nature of how you get to degree awarding status in this country, where you have to end up with a royal charter that you have to jump through so many hoops to get. I think probably by working together we've ended up more on this MIT innovation campus idea, which is we're better to put maybe our own university, but the greatest and the best from Oxford, the greatest and the best from Cambridge, the best from Cranfield, the best from the OU, and have a multiversity campus that can actually bring people together from fintech sector, from particularly national security engineering. We've got HMGCCs based in Milton Keynes, which is the sort of our it's the bit of GCHQ that develops the technology to be able to get that information in the first place. So it is very, very, very high-end engineering. All of that in one place then has a huge amount of potential. So I think whereas the Open University or a definite sort of stake in the moment ground for that 1964-70 Labour government, I think sort of like how do we rethink universities for the future again, and having that innovation hub that brings everybody together in the right place to do it. We're having a conversation around if we get Newtown status, could that be loan funded? Could it be grant funded? Would it be funded from borrowing that we might have a 100-year payback on it rather than a 30-year payback at public loans works board rates as opposed to commercial rates? All of that, I think, is wrapped up in a conversation, because it is a sort of like, if you want to build 100,000 houses in my area, we've got to get something in return, but so is the country. So it's a challenging conversation, but not one that I think is beyond the wit of man to fix. I'm wondering, should I tell the story of the past now and about how government stability is really, really important? Milton Keynes have had 2 devolution deals signed off in the past. 2 devolution deals. I've literally got the letters in my inbox. One from Greg Clark. It wasn't even the one where the former mayor of Bedford ranted about grass and foam bus stops and pensions. It wasn't even that one. One that was signed off and then the minister changed, and that left because the 2 local MPs objected to it. And then one that was literally signed off by Jenrick and was meant to be signed off on the day he resigned because of all the Boris Johnson stuff and the touchy-feely MP that they had. but it just shows the benefit of political stability. How the hell can you have had 2 letters signed by the Secretary of State where literally the Secretary of State leaves and overnight the handbrake was pulled and we went off in a completely different direction? It can't happen again. But within that, we had 200 million quid had been signed off. I mean, it was all, I mean, looking back, it was all funny money now that probably had no basis to it whatsoever, but at least Chris would have been able to go in and bat for it like he did on the hospital.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that we do get that combined authority across the line with that Bedford, Luton, Milton Keynes footprint. And look, like, it's a really exciting bit of the country. It will be the bit of the country across those 4 local areas that is building more homes, let's be honest, than almost anywhere else, not just over this Parliament, but over the decades to come, particularly if Thamesford gets signed off as a new town, as, you know, some people have said it should be, alongside the extra house building in Milton Keynes. And I think, like, we shouldn't forget the numbers and the scale that we're potentially talking about in Milton Keynes, because I think that often gets missed. And it's actually, I don't know how you feel, Pete, but it's actually like when you walk around this conferences like this, is when I truly start to realise the scale of what we're building here, because you do hear lots of people get really excited about some of the projects they're building in the other parts of the country. And, you know, we need to be building right across the country. And, you know, particularly in our northern towns, thinking about how we, some of our northern towns, thinking about how we get decent, affordable housing built is a bigger challenge. And it's good that people are putting so much work into trying to unlock that. But in Milton Keynes, you know, the site out to MK East, we've got 5,000 homes with permission, potentially 13,000 more to go, and that's before, you know, you hit the border with central Bedfordshire, and there's even further potentially across the border. You think about to the north of Milton Keynes in my seat, and what the potential could, it's not currently in the local plan, but the potential for what could be built there. You're looking at, you know, maybe even up to 20,000 homes in that direction. You know, what was the size of your bit, West? 8,500 homes project, which is now being finalised, and then thousands of other houses across the south of the city. You know, the current local plan is 60. I think we're sticking 2,500 extra on 20 on the WEA, aren't we? Yeah. And then potentially, you know, and if we can do that development of the Milton Keynes city centre, 30-minute train journey into London, you are talking about potentially 16,000 units there in, you know, what will be one of, if not the biggest densification of a city centre project that this country has ever done. I
think the interesting thing, and everybody in this room probably agrees, is again on that councillor side versus, you know, reality side, is so often I go to meetings with my colleagues and they'll say, what we want is when you build new homes, please developer, can we have the school, and can we have the leisure centre, and can we have the nice road, please, and can we have it made out of brick, not stone, not brick, with chimneys, and can we have the health centre as well, and then we'll allocate you 50 units to do that, and there is a lack of understanding, and I think where we have tried to come from is that there is always going to be a place for infill development, but I will have the same argument with the same quantum of people over building 45 homes as I will over building 3,500 homes. But 3,500 homes comes with the 3 primary schools, the secondary school, the leisure centre, the new health centre, the nice green space, all of that sort of stuff. But councils don't want that. They do want it, but they don't have the bravery to allocate it. What they want is everything, but nothing at the same time. And I think hopefully what we can do in Milton Keynes and through the YIMBY initiative and through developers is show that actually 3,500 homes is not actually that big a site. Not really. Not when you sort of measure out the anger and that sort of public sort of debate that you get over allocating 150 here and 30 there and 40 there. Actually, 3,500 houses is not that big a site. You could get it through quite quickly, and if you do it properly in the right way with a master developer or a single developer, you probably knock out 250 homes a year easily, and you get everything on top of that. So sometimes councils just have to be brave, but to be brave, I think they have to be shown the right way, and that developers are not the enemy. Often developers are very helpful co-producers and colleagues in this debate.
I think as well it's important to recognise the fact that you have the tariff system allows for both to happen. So yes, we have a lot of infrastructure we're delivering on site and have delivered early. In fact, one school and health centre is already there and we haven't got any homes built yet. But because we have the knowledge that this is going to come and there's a bit of long-term certainty, whereas in other parts of the country you're dealing with SIL or Section 106 and you're paying both or you're paying none and you're having this argument, whereas with the tariff scheme you either pay it or you deliver it and then you get a credit if you deliver it. So it allows for that smaller scale developer to also operate if you can get the councillors on board with the politics of it, which is difficult, but it allows the system to work, whereas in other parts of the country it doesn't work as efficiently as that, and that's the real difficulty, and we are losing all of the SME builders because they can't grapple with that. And as you say, that's why we've scaled up in terms of what we deliver, because you have as much painful conversation trying to build 20 houses as you do 3,000. So we are losing a huge chunk of the industry, and we're not going to get them back unless we really try to change the process. And I do think the introduction of strategic planning should help on some of this. I'm a little bit skeptical that it's going to take a little bit while and it'll distract everybody for a while, so I want us to not get too distracted by it. But I do think that will help with that coordination, as what you're saying in terms of that better health care and longer term strategy and having that more sensible conversation with infrastructure funding with government and Homes England. At that strategic level makes it a bit more meaningful from everybody and a bit more certainty. And from a house builder's perspective, we just want long-term certainty where we can kind of deliver at a relatively sensible pace. That's what the supply chain needs, that's what the SMEs need, that's kind of what everybody needs for it to work in a non-cyclical way as it continues to do. So we have to stop this kind of boom and bust cycle in property, because housing is infrastructure. We all live in a home, not a unit, Chris. I was going to correct you on units. Homes. And flats, that's why well, okay. But, you know, we all live in them. But, you know, we have to stop thinking of them as this kind of nice to have. It's just a requirement. We need to kind of get on with it. And as it says, just let's get building there.
And it's good to have a government that is supportive of that agenda and trying to move many of those barriers out of the way as well. And of course, we are today hosted in a home built using MMC by the brilliant British Offsite factory down in Braintree today. We know that, you know, we talk about skills shortage in the industry quite a lot, but we can only really get going with the productivity gains that are going to be required and the factories and the MMC that's going to be required to close that gap and increase productivity in the industry and actually get the 1.5 million homes built if we do end that boom and bust that you talk about. And we can only do that if we push forward with planning reforms and support projects which we know can consistently keep building over many decades, like what we've seen in Milton Keynes, and hopefully the next generation of new towns. Right, I've given you time to come up with questions now. You've got no excuses. Oh, good. Right, Rory, do you want to start? And introduce who you are.
Yeah, Rory Brooke from Savills, and we're working on the scheme you're referring to, North Milton Keynes. But so my question is, so it was interesting you were saying that, you know, you're thinking the tariff's working well, but it's a question on whether there's other innovative funding mechanisms you think should be in place. So particularly where there's commercial significant elements of development, whether you can use rates retention combined with residential borrowing. And this is something I've worked on a number of projects, and I know in my view the government's not properly getting to grips with it and isn't giving clear guidance and commitments. But it'd be good to get your views.
I'll take them in threes, so hands back up. Simon.
Yeah, very quick. Simon Dudley from Hollywood. I'm Chair of Urban Development Corporation. I've chaired Homes England. Just to try and dimension this, obviously fantastic, good luck, 200,000 new homes. What central government grant funding do you anticipate is going to be necessary to deliver that kind of volume?
Go on, and one more.
What's the role of mass rapid transit in unlocking the delivery at the scale and pace that we're talking about?
Elva, do you want to start on some of the funding questions, then we'll go to Pete for the others?
Sure. In terms of kind of innovative funding, there are examples across other parts of the country where you've got TIFs and you know, kind of more innovative borrowing against future business rates and stuff that has worked in the Vauxhall and Elms area of London that was successfully implemented. I don't know whether you've been thinking about this here personally, so I can't answer that as to whether you've been looking at it in Milton Keynes. But from our perspective, it's about having that infrastructure funding delivered and having it secured for the long term so that we know it's there and that it can be built on the back of it. But in terms of from a rates perspective, that's more of a commercial answer. So I don't know whether either of you want to have views on this.
Oh, business rates never pull that piece of string, as poor old James in the Treasury has found out recently, hasn't he? Because obviously 3 years ago city centre properties were highly rated, and now warehouses are highly rated because land values change and the need for those land uses change as well. I do think there is a place for that longer term, particularly the business rate pooling, because at the moment, obviously with the business rates reset just around the corner, if that happens, my gap as a local council goes from 32 million to 64 million because we've been able to grow our city centre in the same way Manchester has and Leeds has. And actually, if you genuinely talk about growth, why would some places go only to have that growth then taken off them and sort of given to somewhere else? That is great, but not all of it should go somewhere else. That's not particularly fair. So I do think there are the longer term ways of how you fund some of this stuff, and I think that links back into that question of, I think a lot of the work that has been done so far is around how would we get that through the number, sort of what would the build rate be, what would you need in terms of ins and outs of logistical stuff. But then that comes down to, well, how much would it cost and how long do you pay for it over a certain amount of time? I think it's in the process of negotiation at the moment, isn't it? So I reckon it will cost about 2 billion quid. That's what we'll ask for, but no doubt will be negotiated down from that. But it is how long a piece of string, isn't it? All of these questions are often how long a piece of string. Yeah. So we are. I think us and MHCLG have probably, with Michael Lyons, have probably settled on a number somewhere. But it's then how the Treasury allows that and where it might sit on book is the question, isn't it? Are we able to borrow it as a Newtown corporation wholly owned by some entity that isn't Treasury borrowing? And I think that will be the key, won't it, is that as long as it doesn't add to our national debt and is probably payable back over some period of time, sometime, it'll probably be whatever you need, so long as it's viable and not bonkers and not Thurrock or Croydon. And then on the MRT, it's absolutely vital, isn't it? I think it's planned to go out to MK East. It's planned through the city centre. It's planned in MK North. And it's also vital to the region. You know, Manchester's tram doesn't just go to the outskirts of Manchester. It goes to Bury, goes to Stockport, goes to Altrincham, goes all over the sort of Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And so again, if we put an MRT up to Towcester, it unlocks Towcester. If we put it out to Winslow, it unlocks Winslow and Winslow Station as well. If we put it out to Cranfield and other places, and possibly even linking into Luton Airport as well, because it's not, public transport should not just be for the north, where there are old industrial rail lines that can be brought back into use. It should be for the southeast as well, because I hate Milton Keynes being lumped in with London and the southeast, like we are two synonymous regions in terms of our infrastructure investment. The southeast, outside of London, is actually one of the lowest in terms of per capita spend on public transport and things like that, and infrastructure outside of London, and people forget that. We always get told London and the southeast gets so much. It's like, well, that's because London get it all, and outside of London it all goes to Manchester. So it's not fair, and we should be very clear that we are not the southeast, and that's why the Mer. We are not London. We are the southeast, and that's why the Mer is also important to make those points into different points of Treasury.
The mayor would also be in the east of England as well, I suppose. But if you love
West Mercia, West Anglia. You come up with a new name. We've been through them all.
Yeah, I like you love that you can lump London in with any region and then go they get everything, right? You go London and the North East get everything. I think just on the point about the university and also on the point about the MRT, right? Like we talk there's a lot of conversation at the moment, as there should be, about this government is determined to build the next generation of new towns. Some of them will be new freestanding settlements. That's really exciting, right? Because the reason we can have this conversation now is because a freestanding settlement was built decades ago, which has been able to consistently grow. So we do need to have that long-term plan for how we're going to create new ones that can consistently grow as well. And sort of the point is the success of Milton Keynes, one of the learning lessons is that it was built to be able to continue growing, and that was built into the original design. But that don't last forever. And I think we are at a point now where, we can reach a point where Milton Keynes can slowly start to stagnate because we don't support the investment that's going to be required so that it continue to consistently grow into the future. And we've started to see some of that, right? We've got some of the longest NHS waiting lists in the country we have had because we've got 20% fewer hospital beds than the rest of the country because the hospital hasn't been able to keep up.
£3 million quid away from, what's the phrase? Away from normal population.
Yeah.
Normal funding for the NHS.
Now, thankfully, this government's come in and it's finally signed off on the funding for a new hospital, which will be built by the end of the decade, which will bring us back up to where we need to be. But we need to take that approach of, if this city is going to continue to grow, if we are going to support, disproportionately support the government's house building target, and we're talking here about potentially aiming to do twice the already quite high allocation that MHCLG has given us for house building, we have to think about how we're going to make sure that we can continue to grow in the future and we don't put that cap in place. And that means not becoming the biggest place in the country without a university, because that's going to end up being a drag on the future of the economy and future potential of the city. It means not becoming one of the biggest a place without a functioning, I shouldn't say one of the biggest places in the country, because we're in the biggest place in the country without a decent public transport network, but which I hope is also going to be fixed in the SR, but ensuring that we can have a functioning public transport system as we continue to grow, because the roads are pretty big and wide in Milton Keynes, but if we want to avoid some of the problems that are clogging up other cities that have grown, we need to make sure that that everybody in a city of over 500,000 people isn't dependent on a car, and that means ensuring that we've got alternatives, and that means putting a mass rapid transport system in place. And the longer we leave it to put that system in place, the harder it is going to be to fund it. Because you'll know with the site that you're doing out in the east and the potential site in the north, if we build that from the start to ensure that it can have a public transport network, then we haven't got to go very far from that development at the moment to the centre of the city and connect everything up. The longer we leave it, the further it has to go, the more expensive it will get to fix later, and eventually you'll put a cap on the city. So we have to be thinking not just about these developments now, but as Pete said, how we can ensure we're thinking so that it can continue to grow as a city in the decades to come.
I've got to go because I've got to go and do something about how AI can improve planning. But I don't have a question. I've just got a thought. And it occurred to me on Friday, was it, when we announced the deal? I've so lost track of time. Was it Monday, the deal with the EU? Yeah. And just how so many of the headlines were dominated by the Scottish fishing industry. And how 350 million was unlocked for the Scottish fishing industry because we've done a deal that will support the Scottish fishing industry if you grow fish. And then somewhere along the line it said, and the Scottish fishing industry employs 2,000 people. And it's like, what? I mean, that's not to denigrate those jobs, but just to point out that between you guys in the room, there's probably triple, if not quadruple, the amount of employment, let alone everything else. And it's sort of, how have we allowed in this country councils to be viewed by the government as the places that block development? Some of them do, and some of them should be taken out and not just sort of hit with the stick but beaten with it until they're perhaps merged with another council. Yeah, well, all of them. All of them. Cherwell being a great example, dropped their local plan half an hour before it was meant to go to cabinet. Why would a planner go and work in a local authority where they're not going to build anything? How has the development industry become to be seen as baddies? That, you know, an announcement on Scottish Fish can unlock 350 million quid overnight like that, and 350 million quid could allow Milton Keynes to build 150,000 houses over the next 30 to 40 years, and create so many jobs out of a university, and how have we got there as a country and as an industry to allow us to be the baddies in the room? And I think hopefully with the YIMBY initiative, part of that is hopefully Milton Keynes can show growth is not bad. Growth is tough and sometimes difficult, but not bad. And it can deliver what it says on the tin. And part of Chris's job, and I think my job, and working with our partners, is to deliver what it says on the tin, not to get planning permission and then sort of go back and sort of value engineer the buildings so they end up as garbage when they go up, all of that sort of stuff. Actually, do what it says on the tin, because my fundamental thought leaving is how have we got into a place where we are the baddies in the room? Considering how many jobs we create, and considering the fundamental point of us is to make those homes, there aren't enough of them. There are 1,000 families in temporary accommodation in Milton Keynes, over 3,000 children who cannot afford a home, and yet we are still arguing about whether we should unlock certain amounts of money for development. You know, it's fundamentally wrong, and we need to change it. We need to change the way that planning and housing is viewed in this country.
Do you want to add any final thoughts, Elva, and then?
No, it's on the massive transit. This is a small point. Just make sure they connect. When they did it in Dublin, they didn't connect in the middle, so just have to have it connecting. But yeah, I think what Pete was saying about we all are kind of a bit divorced from the emotional reality of house building, and you know the economic impact and the economic outcome of those children, one in a classroom who are living in temporary accommodation, is poor and is going to get worse. And until we fix it and stop sitting around talking about it, it's just going to get worse, and we got to get on with it.
Yeah, I'll finish on a similar point. I know there's some questions left, but you can come up and talk to us at the end, and we've also got some people from Milton Keynes here at the front, so please do come up and say hello and talk about some of the fantastic opportunities that we would love to work with people on this room on. But I'll just finish off on a bit of a similar point as well, that I'm the first MP for Milton Keynes that was born there and grew up there. That was on all the leaflets. It went great on the doorstep. I still live there, in a brilliant place done by Places for People. Like, you hear a lot of like people in politics like talk about, you talk about, like, you hear a lot Wes Streeting talk about his cancer treatment and why that drives him to want to fix the NHS and ensure it continues to be there. You see here Bridget, the Education Secretary, talk about her education and how that's driven her success in life. Like, my story's a bit different. I owe my success to the fact that 58 years ago, a Labour government made the kind of brave decision to build a controversial, difficult sometimes, new town in halfway between London and Birmingham, push through the barriers, fight a sometimes resistant Treasury in order to get the funding that was required to build somewhere genuinely great, somewhere that meant like my young working class parents could afford to buy their own home in their early 20s with a spacious 2-bed and a terrace with its own back garden. It meant that we had public services and infrastructure that was there. We had roads that meant mum could make it home from work in 10 minutes. And it meant I grew up within 10 minutes of green space. And so did almost every child who grows up in Milton Keynes. And it is this point about development being seen as a dirty word. It isn't. I owe almost everything in my life to the fact that we made that brave decision to build when there was a housing crisis, when people in this country were growing up in substandard accommodation, many people back then without even having a running toilet inside. And let's be honest, we are back in that situation now, where there is a housing crisis, where we're stealing the future and opportunities from the next generation by robbing them of the opportunities that my young working class parents had. And I'm determined to do what I can in Parliament to make sure we break through it. by breaking down those barriers and ensuring we can build in Britain again, whether that is the homes or the infrastructure or the rail or the roads or the energy infrastructure that this country is going to be required, even when it's politically difficult. I hope I've indicated that I'm always happy to have difficult conversations with my constituents who may oppose some of those things, because I think that vision is important. And I think one of the places where we can build so many of these new homes, where we can ensure that we start to alleviate this country's really tragic housing crisis, is with those extra opportunities in that place that provided me with so many opportunities to start off with. So thank you for joining us. We'll be around at the front if anybody else wants to come and ask us any questions at all. And please do enjoy the rest of your conference.